This morning, welcome. I'm glad you all are here. This morning I would like to give a presentation to all of you about the possibility of leading a group from Grace Lutheran Church over to the Holy Land. So in order to do that, really, I want to share with you a little bit about my experience while I was over there, and that'll include some pictures from my time while I was there, different places that I went, people that I talked to, and then explain some general information about this possibility, this possible trip that we're taking, and some expectations, and then I'll have some time towards the end for some questions. Okay, just some open question and answer. So, the Christian Ed Board actually got me started on this, and looking at this possibility. So this is something that was their idea. And it's important, I feel, actually, for everyone in the congregation, or as many people in the congregation, to know about some of these things in the case that there is a group that goes to the Holy Land, in part due to the nature of the trip. All of those who go, it will be transformational. Okay? And so it'll be important for those who stay home to be aware of what we are experiencing and why we're going and what we're doing when we're there, so that you all can be ready to receive those of us who might go when we return. Just some general information about my trip. I went to the Holy Land in January of 2016. It was a class that was offered by the seminary as a part of the J-Term program that my seminary did. And so I was in the Holy Land for 17 days. Travel time was 19 days. Okay? So it does take a little while to get there. And so there were a lot of people. There were people primarily from the seminary, other classmates of mine from the different classes, the different years in seminary, and there were also a couple of people who they called friends of the seminary who came along on the trip, people who were not actually students, but who, in order to fill out the trip, came along. And I think we had around 20 of us when we went on this trip. We took off from Chicago, and we had 11.5-hour flight to Istanbul. And then we took a little puddle jumper and about 90 minutes from Istanbul to Tel Aviv. So that after that long haul over the big pond, we were fine on that short little 90-minute ride to Tel Aviv. That was easy. Then whoops, I went too quick. Back up. There we go. All right. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, so here's Israel-Palestine. So you can see Israel has got the solid lines around here, and where you see these dotted lines here and here, that is the territory that is Palestinian territory, or is supposed to be Palestinian territory as per the 1947 agreement, when Israel was officially became a nation. Just to give you a little bit of perspective too, okay, so we landed in Tel Aviv and immediately we went to Bethlehem, which is really just south of Jerusalem. And to give you some perspective, to get from Tel Aviv to our hotel in Bethlehem, let me make sure that I get the number right. It took us about 50 minutes and it's about 42 miles. So literally this distance that you see here is about from Muscatine to North Liberty. Okay, so you can get pretty much anywhere in the Holy Land in a matter of hours. All right, this entire area of land could probably fit mostly in Minnesota. Okay, just to give you an idea of the size of the geography that we're talking about here. And we spent several days actually in Bethlehem, so you can see, okay, now there's Jerusalem, Tel Aviv's back up over there. This is the Dead Sea here, and there's Bethlehem. Okay, so literally you're just a couple of miles away. And so we went to Bethlehem, and we stayed there for a couple of days. Really, actually, not that far from what is called Manger Square. And this here is a picture of Manger Square, so literally it's just a little town square in the center of the old city. And this here that you can see is what they call the Church of the Nativity. So it is a church, it's actually a Greek Amalekite church. So it's Eastern Christian tradition. But it is built right next to, they actually share a wall with St. Catherine's Catholic Church. So this is the Western Church. And these churches are built over what is considered traditionally to be the site of Jesus' birth. Okay? It's built over a cave. And there are two different entrances to the cave because the manger wasn't a barn, okay? Like our nice little nativity sets. The manger scene took place in a cave. They would have stables and caves in the side of the hill for the animals. That's where the birth of Jesus took place. And so this is built over that cave, and literally there's one entrance to the cave in the Church of the Nativity and another one in St. Catherine's. So you literally go in one and out the other as you go to visit the spot. Traditionally, where it is recognized, of course, a lot of the holy sites over there are, I say, traditionally known as the site for X. That's because in very few instances, is there an exact confirmation that yes, this is where X happened, right? But the holy sites that are over there are places that are traditionally recognized as being the site of whatever it is that happened in that place, in that location. Okay. Here, actually, to show you a little bit of what, this is technically, quote unquote, the manger. Okay, now you see that they've built an altar over it, and there's actually a space down under here where there is actually a hole in the floor with some exposed rock that is literally considered, okay, now here would be the place. And it would be rock that dates back to the time of Jesus. Okay, so it is bedrock. And you can kneel in, you can see it, you can touch it, that kind of a thing. But this is a common thing that you also saw something very similar to this you'll see something very similar to this when we get to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the location of Mount Calvary where Jesus was crucified. So also in Bethlehem, this particular trip that I took was a trip that not only went and looked at the different religious sites, but also was an opportunity to get to know the people who live in the Holy Land and to hear from them about the situation on the ground and what it is like to live there now and what they have to deal with. And so when we were in Bethlehem, we spent time at a Palestinian conflict resolution center called WIAM. And really what they do is they offer programs to help empower women to find jobs and to seek education, particularly Palestinian women. And they provide services for mediation between families so that they have the opportunity, families who are in the midst of crisis or in the midst of conflict, can have a mediator to help them walk through that kind of a thing. It also serves as a youth center. So you can see here and here in these pictures, there's some playground equipment there, but there's some open space for children and youth to be at work and to play. And you'll also notice that this center is immediately next to this huge wall. That wall is a separation wall, that has been built and constructed by the Israeli government in order to separate the Israelis from the Arabs or the Palestinians. And it is not a straight wall. It is not a wall that runs a border. It is a wall that zigzags and cuts in and out of streets. You can be driving down the streets of Jerusalem and you have to turn because there's this huge 30-foot wall. You can't go there. You have to find a different route. It makes absolutely no sense. And it serves primarily as a purpose of oppressing the Palestinian people. And it is a way for, there are literally people, let's see, what was my next slide? Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, so we jumped to Galilee.
I'd like this presentation much more orally.
Yeah, gee, thanks, John. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened to that. I clicked the button and it must have been held down. Okay. So I'll get to the refugee camp in a little bit, and I'll talk about that then. But this is one of the places that we met where we were able to talk with some of the Palestinians about some of what they go through over there. Here are some general pictures of what the landscape is like around the area of Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Okay? So as you go further north, it becomes a little bit more vegetative and a little bit more lush, and the further south you go, it becomes a little bit more arid and more desert-like as you approach the Negev, okay? The desert Negev. Then we also had the opportunity to go to, you can see here how the buildings all of a sudden look a little bit more uniform and look more modern. That is because this here, and there's a picture actually of Efrat, which is what it is a Jewish settlement that has been built in Palestinian territory illegally. And the Israelis have done this in a lot of different places, but that's what this is here. And we actually had the opportunity then to go to an Israeli settlement and to have a tour of it and to talk with one of the residents there and hear his particular perspective on, primarily hearing about how it is his understanding that the Holy Land, that it is right for Israel and the Jewish people to have a state, to have a nation, and to be able to take the Holy Land back as it is the promised land given to them by God. And so we heard that. We heard that perspective, and here we are meeting with them there. Then we had the opportunity to go to a place called Herodion, which is actually one of 4 castles, fortresses that were built in Jerusalem by Herod the Great. Now, Herod the Great was the king the Jewish king, who was essentially a Roman puppet, a puppet of the Roman Empire at the time that Jesus was born. Okay? Herod the Great was known actually for doing a lot of big building projects in a lot of different places. And so this fortress was actually one of the places that he built, and it's really not that far from Jerusalem and Bethlehem. But here you can see a little model of what the fortress would have looked like originally. Here are the remains of what it looks like today at the top of this mountain that he's built up. And you can actually go down and you can look at the aqueduct system that he had built in order to bring water up this huge hill from the valley to this fortress to supply them with water. It's actually quite a very interesting and amazing architectural feat. But then here also you have a glimpse of what they call the Judean wilderness. Okay? So you can see that it's even more arid. It's very rocky, it's very hilly, and it's very dramatic landscape. So it's very straight up and straight down. And this is the kind, I show you this picture because this is the kind of wilderness that Jesus may have wandered in for 40 days when he was being tested. Okay? So then we had the opportunity to go to a location called Shepherd's Fields, which is a traditional location marking a place where shepherds outside of Jerusalem may have been keeping watch over their flocks by night on that wonderful Christmas day. And there is actually also a cave there where shepherds might have kept the sheep, and you get to go in there. They also have a chapel that was built to kind of commemorate the angels appearing to the shepherds, and it was a beautiful space. Then we took a couple of day trips from Bethlehem, and one of the trips that we took was to a location called, let me make sure that I pronounce this right, Qasr al-Yahud, which is a traditional site, one of the 2 traditionally recognized sites that is a potential site of the baptism of Jesus. Okay? So this here is the Jordan River. The mighty Jordan River. You see how wonderfully dirty and small it is. Okay, so here, where you can see this, that's right here, right? Okay, so this is Israel, Palestine. That's Jordan. Okay, so you literally, it's a really small river. not a big river, and it's very dirty, very, very dirty. But this is one of the traditional sites of the baptism of our Lord. One of the things, I'm going to back up a second and talk a little bit about while we were in Bethlehem. One of the places that we went to where we had the opportunity to meet some people was a refugee camp, actually, for Palestinian people who have literally been dislocated from their homes in Bethlehem because of the Israeli government coming in and taking over the land that is theirs and putting up a separation wall. And so literally there were some people who were living in this refugee camp who were refugees living blocks from the location of where their house actually stands. But they can't go there because the Israeli military will not allow them to do so. And so they are living within walking distance from home, but they can't go home. So that was one of the places that we went. We also, one of the day trips we took was to a place called Masada. So here's Ephrat, that was the Jewish settlement that I mentioned. And there's Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and we went all the way down over here to about this location here. And this is on the Dead Sea again. And this is the location of a fortress also built by Herod the Great called Masada, which was the place of the last stand in the first Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire back in the year 73. So this is after Jesus has died, and the temple has been destroyed. The second temple has been destroyed. It was destroyed in the year 70. And the Jewish people had decided to revolt against the Roman Empire to try and free themselves from their oppression. And this was the location of their last stand. And so we went there, and it's quite gorgeous there. So here you can look out and you can see the Dead Sea. And here's looking inland. Here are some of the ruins of the fortress that you still see. And part of what we got to see was actually this mosaic, this floor mosaic, does date back to 73 CE. So this is an original piece of art that was there while Jesus was alive. Right? And so it's absolutely amazing that it's still intact and in as good a shape as it is. And of course, while we were on our way back north, we hit the site of Qumran, which is the location where the Dead Sea Scrolls were recently found. And so you can actually look over and you can see the different caves. And they found the caves, or they found in the scrolls in those different caves in clay jars, kept in clay jars, which is how they were preserved over time. So for those of you who don't know, the Dead Sea Scrolls was a discovery. I don't remember exactly the date of the discovery of that. It was in the 60s. It was in like the 60s or 70s, somewhere in there. That's what I was going to guess. And really what that did is we were able to find a lot of texts, scrolls that are from the Old Testament, and also some writings that did not make it into the New Testament. Right? So they call them the Gnostic Gospels, so the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas, and the like. Okay? And of course, we took the opportunity to swim in the Dead Sea. And as you can tell, it's true. When you sit down, you float. Literally, you do not have to know how to swim in the Dead Sea. Okay? I can testify to it. It was the easiest place to swim. It's also probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been swimming in my life. As you can see the background, looking over there, actually what would have been the region of Moab. Then back in Bethlehem, one of the people that we had the opportunity to meet was the Reverend Dr. Dmitry Raheb, who is a Palestinian Christian. He is a Lutheran Palestinian pastor over there in the Holy Land, and he runs what they call the Dayar Consortium, which is actually a college for Palestinian students, so that has a particular focus. They cover all subjects, but it has a particular focus on Palestinian culture and the arts. So thinking like culinary arts and music and the fine arts, those kinds of things. And so we got to meet him and to talk with him about his work to try and empower the Palestinian people and to provide them for an education. Then we made our way from Jerusalem, or Bethlehem, all the way up to Nazareth and then to the region of Galilee, surrounding the Sea of Galilee, which was here. So it took us a couple of hours to get there, but just to give you an idea of where we went next. Here in Nazareth is what we call the Basilica of the Annunciation. This is a basilica, a church that was built in order to commemorate the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary, saying that she was going to give birth to the Son of God. And this church actually has several layers to it that have been built on top of one another. And when you go in, it's absolutely gorgeous, by the way. And when you go in, you see here, there's a hole in the ceiling. Well, that hole in the ceiling is a hole in the floor, right actually over here. You can see people standing at the rail, and you look down, and that lowest level is the site of a church that dates back to the 1st century. So it's the very early church, right? And it is a Christian location, it is a Christian site. That is one location that a lot of these locations that I'm sharing with you are ones where we would potentially go and see on a trip over there. Then we arrived in the Galilee. Here is the Galilee. Jesus knew what he was doing when he decided to make Galilee the center of his ministry. He was no dummy, okay? This is probably one of the most beautiful and peaceful places I've ever been in my life. And here now is the Sea of Galilee, and you can see it in a couple of different places. It was a wonderful place, and it has been some place that I've longed to go back ever since I left. Now, while we were in the Galilee, we stayed around here, around Tabgha, in a place there, which actually is a location, I think, that's really close. You can see where it is in relation to Capernaum. Okay, so Capernaum was really Jesus' center of ministry. The lake itself is like 14 miles long and 10 miles wide, and about 104 feet deep at its deepest point. So it is a large lake. Okay? And yes, it is a lake. It is fresh water. So here you can see, actually, this is really important. So when you think about the Sea of Galilee and the windstorms that would come up, and the story about Jesus walking on the water in the midst of the storm and the people are scared, well, okay, so here's going to give you an example of why. All right, so you've got this huge lake that was deeper then than it is now, okay, and it's a pretty steep drop-off. It gets deep real quick, real fast. And here you've got this really dramatic landscape that really kind of creates a wind tunnel. Okay? So all of a sudden, up out of nowhere, here come these really strong winds, and it creates some pretty large waves. And here's the boat that you're in. Here's a boat that dates back to the time of Jesus. Okay? And is a boat that would have been about the standard size of a regular fishing boat. Okay? So can you imagine 13 people in this boat with 10-foot waves? There's a reason they were afraid, right? And of course, then, we had the opportunity to take a ride on our own boat, a much bigger, and we didn't have to row and we didn't have to sail, out on the Sea of Galilee, and I actually had the opportunity to preach on the Sea of Galilee on the boat. I gave the devotion that we had while we were on the Sea of Galilee, which was absolutely one of my favorite experiences in my entire life. I love it. Let me make sure that I'm not skipping anything. And I need to watch my time. Okay, so I'm going to pick things up here a little bit. Okay? When we went, I mentioned that we stayed in Tabgha. Okay? Tabgha is a region or a little area that is house to the site of what they call the primacy of Peter and the Church of the Multiplication. Okay? So this is considered, quote unquote, traditionally the site of the feeding of the 5,000. 5 loaves and the 2 fish that fed 5,000 people, 5,000 men actually, not counting the women and children. And there's a church there built to commemorate that. And it is also the primacy of Peter, the understanding of the place where Jesus ate fish with the disciples after the resurrection and essentially reinstated Peter as the rock on which he was going to build the church by asking him 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" And this was probably just, again, to give you another, so we were staying here, we went to Tapia, then we went to Capernaum. And here is the location of Capernaum. Now, these ruins actually do date back to the time of Jesus. Okay? And what they have done in order to help preserve the excavation of Peter's house, so literally, this is the house, this is one that we know, is Peter's house. Because Peter's house was, over time, turned into a church. It was built bigger and bigger so that it was a small little church. And, well, the church is right underneath this church that was built in order to help preserve the site. Okay? And so here's the church, and here now you can look down and actually see Peter's house, St. Peter's house. And again, Capernaum was the place and the location where Jesus centered his ministry. Here now is what they call the Mount of Beatitudes. So a potential location for the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gave. Blessed are those who are poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they will see God, so on and so forth, right? And this is a church that is built in order to commemorate that site and essentially the 10 Beatitudes. They call it the Church of the Beatitudes. And it is gorgeous. You can see from there why this might have been a spot where Jesus wanted to preach and teach. All right, so then we made our way actually up. So here's Capernaum, right? We made our way now up then to this region, which is really close to, here's Lebanon, and here's Syria over here, and here's the area of Jordan. Okay, so all of these countries are coming together right here, and this is really near what they call, there's Mount Hermon. So we did go all the way up there, okay, to a site called Tel Dan, which literally means the location of, or the well of Dan, okay. And it is an archaeological site dating back actually to the tribe of Dan. So when the Israelites originally went in and first occupied the Holy Land, so even older than some of the sites that I've showed you so far. It is one of the 3 originations of the Jordan River. And from there you can see Mount Hermon, which is referred to quite a bit in Scripture. Also at Mount Hermon, at the base of Mount Hermon, is the city of Caesarea Philippi, which is, did I have it? I might have actually had a slide for Tel Dan. I did. So here is actually the location of the spring, one of the 3 springs that feeds into the Jordan River. Okay. Then, my clicker thing. Oh, and now it went too fast. And here is Caesarea Philippi. Okay. Now, Caesarea Philippi was a Roman city. It was one of the centers of trade in the Roman Empire and was the seat of Roman governor for the region. So the Caesarea Philippi was also the location of what they call the Temple of Pan. Pan was a god, a Greek god. Okay? And it was in this location, probably the furthest north that Jesus actually traveled in the midst of his ministry. It was at this location that Peter made the confession, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." Then we had the opportunity to travel to a village called Ibilib, which is a Palestinian village, where we met Abuna Eliashikur, who is a former archbishop of the Greek Melkite Church over there in Israel and Palestine. And he was probably the most profound person that I met and had the opportunity to hear from while I was over there. Because here was someone who grew up his entire life almost being oppressed by different people, by different groups of people, and he sat there and he has been constantly, continuously working for peace and for reconciliation between people in the Holy Land. And he sat there as someone who has been oppressed his entire life, and he said, "Do not be my friend at the expense of the other side." I'm sorry, that still gets to me, because it just, you want to talk about a living witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ. He said, "You do me no good as my friend if you decide to hate the person who is oppressing me. You need to be their friend too. You need to love them too." And he said that with quite conviction. And that was extremely profound for me. And we may, if we go on the trip over there, he is the one that I requested as a top priority for us to meet if we were to go. Then we made our trip and travel on over down to here, another Caesarea. This is Caesarea Philippi, so here is, or Caesarea Maritima, sorry, as opposed to Caesarea Philippi. This is the Sea of Galilee. We made our way back down over here on our way to Jerusalem. And Caesarea Maritima was another big Roman city in the area. It was a port of trade and was also the location where Apostle Paul was in prison prior to his being, quote-unquote, literally shipped over to Rome. And it was the point of his departure. And so we were able to see that. It was actually kind of cool. They're really well preserved. Here's an amphitheater that was preserved back from the time of Jesus' day. This is an arena where they would have had horse races. Here is a part of the Roman aqueduct that is still standing. This is what it looks like up in the aqueduct. Yes, I climbed the thing. I couldn't resist. Yeah. And then we made our way back from Caesarea Maritima back down to Jerusalem. And we stayed in Jerusalem for a couple of days. One of the things that we got to do while we were there is to walk Palm Sunday Road, which would have been and this one we do know for sure, would have been the route that Jesus took from the Mount of Olives down into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. From the top of it, you can see the Temple Mount. Okay? So this is the site and the location of the old Jewish temple. And this here is the Temple Mount, and you can see on top of it is built the Dome on the Rock, a Muslim mosque. Okay? A Muslim center for worship. And actually, this is considered to be the second most holy site for the Muslims, second only to Mecca. Okay? And here now, as walking down Palm Sunday Road, and here actually, where we ended, was in the Garden of Gethsemane, the place where Jesus prayed before being crucified, the place where Jesus was arrested. And it is actually the Garden of Gethsemane, and some of those olive trees that you saw in that picture date back to the time of Jesus. So then, also on the Mount of Olives, or adjacent to the Mount of Olives, we visited Augusta Victoria Hospital, which is a hospital for Palestinian people who have little to no health care. It is funded almost entirely by donations from the Lutheran World Federation, so we have close ties through our Lutheran brothers and sisters around the world to this particular hospital. We met with the director, Mark Brown, and he was able to tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that they face over there, particularly in dealing with insurance companies that are primarily Israeli, because the Palestinians don't have the infrastructure in order to have their own insurance companies, and dealing with the different health issues that they have over there. One of the things that was actually also very profound, you can see here some of those structures again that begin to look a little modern and very standardized. That is the beginning of a Jewish settlement in Palestinian territory. Jerusalem is split between what is supposed to be Palestinian territory and Israeli territory. This hospital is in Palestinian territory. There is a Jewish settlement, illegally built, and you see these trailers here, they're still continuing construction. And actually, the reason that this soccer field exists, this is actually on the hospital property. The reason that soccer field exists was because if they didn't build that, then the Jewish settlement would have continued to build onto hospital property without the proper authority and right to do so. This is a couple of pictures from a location in Jerusalem. One of the things, no, this isn't the part of the Via Dolorosa yet. So this is the location called St. Peter at Gallicantu. This is a location where Peter would have denied Jesus 3 times. And this is one that we're quite certain about. Now this here actually is, okay, you're looking at the Temple Mount, right? You see the Dome of the Rock? It's very identifiable in the old city of Jerusalem. And so here is the location on the site of the old temple. This here is the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. And we were able to go there and actually to welcome Shabbat, to welcome the Sabbath with our Jewish brothers and sisters while we were there. It was an amazing, phenomenal experience. And they have a Jewish side and a Christian side to the Wailing Wall, and we were able to then to approach, and actually you can see, so you hear about people actually sticking prayers in the wall. They do that. They do that. Then we also had the opportunity to walk the Via Dolorosa. So the Via Dolorosa is essentially a path, a walking path that marks the path of Jesus, celebrates essentially from the time of his arrest to the time where he was on trial, and so on and so forth, all the way to the point of the crucifixion. And essentially it follows the different stations of the cross. So if you have any understanding, the Catholic understanding of the stations of the cross, that's what the Via Dolorosa is. Okay? We were able to walk that. You can see that the stations are marked along your way. So here's Station 4, there's Station 5. This is the first station, or one of the first stations where we started walking the Via Dolorosa, which is actually the site where Pilate had his castle and his house, they're called the Praetorium. And it is actually that building, that location where he would have been, where Jesus was put on trial. And now we walked this. Via Dolorosa ends at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a church that is built over the site of Golgotha, the location of the crucifixion of Jesus. And here actually you can see the steps to get up to the top of what they call Mount Calvary, to actually see the spot where Jesus potentially was crucified. Also, in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is what they call the Dome of the Resurrection. Absolutely beautiful architecture. And this Dome of the Resurrection, part of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is actually built over a site that was a tomb that is traditionally recognized as the tomb where Jesus was interred for 3 days. And you can actually go in and you can see it. Now here is a little bit of an understanding. This is where the hotel was. There's a look at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Here's a mosque. I forget the name of the mosque. And here is the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer, where actually there is an American Lutheran pastor who has been serving there for several years, Carrie Smith. And we may actually have the opportunity to meet with her as well if we go over there. I met with her while she was there, and she was able to tell me about her ministry there. And then, of course, one of the best parts of this whole thing was the food. The food over there, absolutely fantastic. And so you can see there was one day that actually we went into an open-air market in Jerusalem. We bought a bunch of fresh fruit and some freshly baked bread that was literally still hot out of the oven. And we had a lunch of fruit and bread, and it was amazing. Okay, you've never had a pomegranate until you've had a pomegranate in the Holy Land. And the same thing about olives. If you think you like olives now, oh boy, you will be addicted by the time you come back. I actually didn't like olives before I went to the Holy Land. I love olives now. By the end of the trip, I was disappointed if we didn't have olives at the meal. Of course, so it was a wonderful time. It was a time of places and people. It was extremely holy. And I am a pastor differently now than I would have been before I went. So it is very much so a transformational experience. And so there's a couple of pictures of the people. So now I just want to move into the part where I give you a little bit of general information. So we would be looking at the possibility of a trip in October of 2020. The temperatures at that time of year over the Holy Land would be somewhere in the 60s and the 70s, so a little bit warmer than what we typically have here. We would be there for about 12 days. The cost for a potential trip like this, to see a lot of the different sites and talk to a lot of the different people that I mentioned in this presentation, would cost somewhere between $4,600 to $4,800, depending upon what the actual airfare cost at the time. Yeah, that's per person. However, that cost, that $4,600 to $4,800, that includes your airfare. That includes your hotels, the transportation while we're there, at least 2 meals a day, breakfast and dinner, sometimes lunch as well. The cost of the tours, honorariums for speakers, gratuity for meals, and tips for drivers and tour guides. Okay, so after we would have that initial cost covered, the only additional cost would likely be for us to get to and from the airport, which we would either take some 15-passenger vans, or we would carpool, or you just go on your own. Lunches most days are on your own, and then spending money, and then if you wish to purchase travel insurance, which would be offered by the travel group that we go with, which would not simply cover the potential cancellation of the trip, but would also cover medical insurance while we're over there, if something were to happen. Okay. We will be doing some serious fundraising if we do this trip. So by no means will people be expected to pay that outright, right? But we would be doing some serious fundraising. We will ask those, actually, because of the cost of the trip, those who have the ability to pay more to actually do so, so that those who have less funds available to pay for the trip up front can have a little bit more of the fundraised money that we raise. There's about a $500 deposit that we would have to make that is refundable up until about a couple of months before the trip, if you were to last minute change your mind or some situation were to arise where you're not able to go. We need 15 people to make this trip happen. 20 to 25 is preferred. The absolute max is 40, and it is actually not recommended that we take 40. As your leader, I'm recommending that if we go, we don't take 40, because it becomes extremely difficult to get into restaurants. Spaces are tighter over there than they are over here, and it also becomes a lot more difficult to do things like devotions and to debrief the situation that we're doing over there as a large group like that. Here's what to expect, okay? Do not expect me to take you on a Disneyland tour of the holy sites. Yes, we will go to the holy sites. We will spend time in devotion and prayer there. We will read scripture that is associated with those sites. But this tour is not just about the sites, it is about the people. So we will be engaging with some of the same people that I've mentioned in this presentation. We will be engaging with people who live there. We will be hearing from them their story. And we will be hearing from all different sides of the conflict, not just one. Okay? And that is very important to me. I had that particular opportunity, and so it is important to me to provide that same kind of immersion for you as well. Do expect that we will spend time intentionally debriefing the experience while we are there. We will spend time in intentional reflection and devotion to personal prayer. There will be several meetings prior to leaving for a book study. There's a book, potentially two, that I will have you read that we will discuss before we go over there, kind of to prime us for some of the things that we will encounter. We will spend time intentionally in prayer together and getting to know the people who are going to be on the trip, and there will also be an official presentation from the travel company at one point. I've already talked to you about the potential sites and the potential people. Expect plenty of walking if you are to go on this trip. We do a lot of walking. Okay? Do expect to eat traditional fare there. What I will say about the food there is that it's essentially, if you go on this trip, it'll be like going on a 12-day diet and exercise program because of the amount of walking and how healthy the food is over there. At no point did I go hungry. At no point for even the pickiest eaters on the trip was there something for them to eat that they could actually enjoy. And boy, is it healthy. I lost weight while I was there. And I did not stop eating. Like, we ate so much food. It was amazing. Cell phones will not work over there, okay? So just don't expect that. And there is very limited access to the internet. There will be some in some of the places that we stay. Just a really brief update on the situation over there, okay? So that you have an idea of what the situation on the ground is. Back in 1947, after the end of World War II, the popular movement, or the political movement called Zionism, kind of went out on the world sphere because of a worldwide guilt felt about what had happened in the Holocaust with the extermination of the Jews. And so they were able to petition the United Nations to establish what was going to be an actual Jewish state, which now then became the nation of Israel. The original plan for that, so the little white dots on here shows you the different locations where Jews lived in the Holy Land prior to this particular agreement. The original proposal of partitioning of the land was to be this. So the green was going to be Palestinian territory and the white was going to be Israeli territory. The Jerusalem was going to be entirely controlled by the United Nations. What ended up happening was this. This was the official agreement. You can see that the Palestinians ended up with much less land than originally was proposed. And over the course of time, from really starting in 1967 to the present, the Israelis have continuously encroached upon the Palestinian land that is rightfully theirs. And I keep in mind that the Palestinian people, okay, they occupied the whole land. And so now all of a sudden in 1947, the world is forcing them all to move. So everyone who lived in this white area is now forced to move and to live in these two green areas. And then the Israeli government started building settlements and the separation wall. And this is a map that is closer to really what is Israeli controlled land and what is Palestinian controlled land. It is a complicated situation. There is not just one side to the situation. There are not two sides to the situation. There are many sides to the situation over there. It is complicated, and whatever you think you know about it, you don't. And I say that in all seriousness. Until you go there, until you experience it, until you talk with the people, we know nothing about this conflict and what is going on and what all is involved on all the different sides. Just a brief comment about, because I know that it'll be a question that comes up, is safety and security. Okay? So the Israel-Palestine has been a volatile area for many years, right? It continues to be. However, for one, the travel group that we go with, if the situation on the ground is heated to the point where it is unsafe for us to be there, they will not bring us on the trip. We will not go. Okay? If while we are over there is some situation that arises that we're not able to go to a place that we were originally scheduled to go, we will change the itinerary. That actually happened once to us while we were over there. We were scheduled to go to Hebron and we didn't because there was a shooting down there. So also, know that it is a lot safer over there than you think it is. Okay? As someone who is freaked out myself about the potential of going over there and what the security might be and feeling safe, I felt safer over there than I do most places in the United States. And actually, while you are there, you will be safer than you would be in downtown Chicago or New York City. Okay? There are different Israeli checkpoints that we would go through from time to time as we move back and forth between Palestinian territory and Israeli territory. And sometimes they will actually come on the bus and check passports randomly. Sometimes they don't. I will tell you that being an American has its privileges. One of them is that people don't bother you in the Holy Land. The Israelis like us. They like particularly the United States government. And so if you have a United States passport, you are good as gold over there. Okay? I just wanted to bring that But, just before I open it to questions, and I will take some questions before we go, and I want to actually have the time for that. If we go on this trip, it will be a life-changing trip. You will learn a lot, and it's powerful. It is powerful to visit the sites, but you will also be affected, most certainly very deeply, by the people that we encounter while we're over there. Okay? So with that, now I would like to open it to questions.
So the travel, you talk about going back and forth to different places, predominantly that's in a bus or what?
Yes, predominantly going back and forth, our transportation while we're over there is on a coach bus.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So we don't have to worry about taxis or small vans or stuff like that. Actually, some of the driving that the bus drivers do over there is really impressive. Other questions? Yeah, Tina. Is there an age restriction? I would say that high schoolers are okay going on the trip if they have a parental unit going along. In part because of rooming situations, and also the fact that we are going to be in a different country, and also in part because of the nature of some of the things that we will be witnessing and experiencing while we are over there. So it requires a level of maturity, and I would feel uncomfortable. It would have to be a pretty special circumstance in order for a high schooler to go over there without a parent or someone that they are closely related to, who could really walk with them intentionally while we're over there. Because as I mentioned, it would be a very life-changing event, and will profoundly impact everyone on the trip, including teenagers if they go along. But that would be something that I would ask. So I would say, but no younger than high school, because of the nature of the trip. Yeah, Don.
How much of this trip would involve, let's say, walking in Jesus' footsteps? What percentage?
A percentage of the trip that would involve walking in Jesus' footsteps? Well, essentially anywhere you go over there, you'll be walking in Jesus' footsteps.
But I meant the real high points.
Yeah, I mean, we would find ourselves in places and locations where Jesus was probably about 70 to 90% of the time. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, Art.
When we go to the different locations that, people normally think about going to, will they be crowded? We all go on things where you get to some place and you're one of 100,000 people, it seems like are there.
Yeah, so the question is, will some of the holy sites be crowded? And undoubtedly we are going to run into some of that. Really, it wasn't that bad, and actually probably the most crowded place that we went to was the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the location of Mount Calvary. That was probably the most busy place that we went. Of course, we were there in January. Yes, will we encounter some places that are full and a little bit crowded and have to deal with that? Yeah. But it also depends upon the day that we go there, the time of day that we travel to some of these places. Because some of them will actually probably end up having entirely to ourselves while we're there. So do we expect crowds? Yes, but not everywhere that we go, and not the entire time we're there, especially when we're in Galilee. Okay. Tina. General time frame, sometime in October of 2020. And so if that question is pertaining to the possibility of a high schooler in your particular household wanting to go, it is if there is an issue at the high school, I would be willing to talk with them about that possibility. And if you work, if you're in high school and you want to go, go. If you have an inclination at all to go, do not let your schedule or the fact that it is going to take 12 days be the thing that deters you from going on this trip. It is entirely 120% worth it. Okay? It is worth your time. It is worth the time off from work. It is worth the time off from school and everything that it will entail for you to make that up. Jane.
The lodging over there, is that typical hotel lodging?
Yeah, so the lodging will depend upon what they can find for us while we're there. We will primarily be in hotels. When I was there, my experience was that we were just in a general hotel in Bethlehem. We stayed at what they call a Pilger House, which is a hotel resort-esque kind of feel to it. And when we were in Galilee, it was amazing. And we stayed actually, when we were in Jerusalem, in the Lutheran Guest House over there. So it's actually an establishment run particularly by Lutherans and is meant for groups who are there on pilgrimage. So there's the potential that we could be staying there as well. But yes, primarily we'll be in hotels. Yes, we will not be doing homestays or anything like that. The accommodations will be nice. So. Tina.
What is the time of your typical day?
What does the time of a typical day look like?
Like, what time are we getting up?
Typically you're probably getting up and going somewhere around 8:30. Okay. Some of the things, I mean, if we need to travel a little bit, it might be a little bit earlier. If there's, if we have to travel like an hour or something like that to get to a particular site to start our day. But we're wrapping up typically in the mid-afternoon, and so by the time we get, typically there's a little bit of free time in the day before supper, and the evenings are almost always free, unless that's the only time of the day that they can actually schedule a presenter or someone to come and talk with us. And the conversations that we'll be having will probably primarily take place in the evening and will be probably a little bit more of like, some people are internal processors, some people are external processors, and so I'll encourage people to come as often to those conversations as we can. But if people just they're exhausted and they're tired and they need that time in the evening just to be, they'll have the opportunity to do that. So we're almost always done and wrapping up our day by like 4 or 5 o'clock. These are good questions.
Will you always be together during the day and the evening?
Yeah.
There's no chance of separating?
So there may be opportunities during the free time to go about and do a little bit of exploring on your own, but most of the time we will be together as a group, right? And my suggestion to everyone will be, obviously you guys are adults and you can take care of yourselves, right? But if you do decide to break away from the group and go and do something by yourself during the free time, okay, we will stay together when we're supposed to be together, but during the free time, if you decide that you want to like walk the open market in Jerusalem or something like that, you're most certainly free to do so. Okay, so then at this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask part of the reason of doing this and having this now was so that I can begin to gauge interest on this, okay? Because if we're going to go, we need to know that we're taking a group sometime soon in order to be able to do the particular fundraising and preparation that we need to do to make this kind of trip happen. So, what I'm asking of you is if you are interested, okay, to give me over on that table over there's a couple of sheets where you can put your name, and I want each person individually, so if there are couples, each person puts their name down separately, okay, so that it's easier for me to count and keep track of, and I ask for you to give me your name, your level of interest, so you're slightly interested, you might be able to be convinced to go on a trip like this, but you're unsure. You're strongly interested, and it's probably pretty likely that you would go on a trip like this, but there maybe are some hesitation there yet. Or yes, absolutely, 100% I would go on this trip. Okay? In no way, shape, or form is this an official form of commitment to going on the trip at this point. Okay? It is merely for me to be able to gauge how much interest to see whether or not this is even possible. Okay? So I ask you to do that. Thank you for your time. And as you have any other questions, please do feel free to approach me and to ask me about them, and I will be more than willing to talk with you about this kind of trip and my experience. So, thank you.